The Bomberman series of Nintendo 64 games could be described as a mixed bag. For every single player highlight, there was one which felt like a bit of a letdown in the multiplayer mode. Whilst the first N64 Bomberman game felt like a slower paced, puzzle fueled blast, Hudson Soft were not afraid of mixing up the gameplay mechanics in the other releases. Landing on store shelves in mid-1998 came Bomberman Hero, and to the surprise of many, the multiplayer mode was entirely ditched, instead giving us what was promised to be one of the most action-packed single-player Bomberman experiences to date. It divided opinion completely, and if you watch other reviews of the game, you'll often hear huge swings in opinions on it. The basic storyline in the game may come across way too familiar. A princess is on the run from an evil army, and she hides an important disc inside a robot and launches it to a below planet, just in time before she's captured. No surprises then that our hero finds the discs and set about his quest. Does this sound too familiar? Well, as almost everybody points out, the game has a very Star Wars-esque storyline. But hey, if it worked for George Lucas, then there's no reason why the studio felt a need to deviate too much from this. It's extremely rare that I start a review by talking about a game's audio, but I'm willing to make an exception for this one. Quite possibly, this game has one of the most memorable and enjoyable soundtracks on the console for me personally. I do feel, however, this may be specific to those of us that are in Europe, as around the time of the game's release, drum and bass and garage music was quite popular, and the soundtrack here draws heavily from this style of music's influence. Listening to the soundtrack is almost like a time capsule of living in the UK at this time, and sure, it may be pure nostalgia speaking, but the quality, composition and variance in the styles in the game is sublime. I was also impressed with just how clear the audio is even to this day, playing the game nearly 2 decades after its original release. The effects too are also well done, and although they can sound more muffled than expected, the sheer amount of blasts and sound effects in the game delivering really a great solid experience and keeps things sounding fresh each time you play. Speaking of the gameplay, things here are a lot different than in Bomberman 64. Bomberman Hero is very much like an action-packed 3D platformer with a faster speed, more character actions to master, different upgrades and level-specific gameplay changes. The big difference here is the size of the levels. Each planet is broken down into areas, and each area into smaller sub-levels. The sub-levels themselves are much smaller and contained than the huge sprawling areas found in many 3D platformers. Most levels can be completed very quickly once you know what to do, and this has made the game a dream for speedrunners to play through because watching it is almost like being strapped on the front of a roller coaster. Those who enjoyed the slower paced, more tactical gameplay of Bomberman 64 will no doubt feel let down as the game has very little in the way of puzzles compared to its predecessor. To combat this, and to add some much needed replay value, each level has a strong scoring system, and so for those completionists, there's a huge amount to work through here, as trying to get a perfect score on each mission will take quite some time. This is not just filler either, as getting a complete perfect score unlocked minigames and also the game's final world, which packs a lot of challenge and gives you the true ending. The game's handling is definitely something that will take some getting used to. Bomberman moves with quite some speed, aside from the fairly frequent slowdown moments. His jumping, however, has a very forgiving, floaty feel to it. At first, this made it very difficult to time jumps, as you get a whole ton of time in the air to adjust your landing. Again though, this is something that you'll learn to use to your benefit, and it makes shaving seconds off each level possible. For those however hoping for a more, say, Mario 64 style open world platformer, this game feels more on rails, and Bomberman Hero may not be to your taste. It does in my opinion make the game feel much more concise than it is, but you do lose those frustrating moments where you're just wandering around aimlessly trying to find the next item or location to visit. Another point that you'll either love or hate are the vehicle-based levels, which are spattered throughout the game. I personally really enjoyed them and found that they broke up the gameplay perfectly as they're not too overused. As you enter the level, you'll get a cutscene of the vehicle which you'll be using, and these fall into various forms such as a helicopter, submarine, jetpack and so on. They completely change the gameplay up and offer their own challenge and tactics that you'll need to master. Speaking of mastery, the boss battles are pretty epic, and the highlight of reaching the end of each world. Like all boss battles should be, they often leave you scratching your head at first thinking how they take damage, then you'll have a period of mastering them and finally taking them down. The design, variance and duration of these battles are also very good, and you won't find yourself languishing on them for too long and lose interest in the main game. The overall presentation of Bomberman Hero is a little bit of a letdown. I could forgive Bomberman 64 for being a little rough around the edges, but there isn't the second generation graphical leap that many other platform games on the console felt at the time of this game's release. It's not an ugly game by any means, and the colours, environments and polygons all do the job sufficiently, but the amount of pop-up and the poor draw distance can cause you problems, especially in the later stages of the game. From start to finish, I really enjoyed Bomberman Hero. The faster paced gameplay and the fact it's so easy just to pick up and play due to the smaller level pieces means this is a game you won't have to try and complete in one marathon sitting. For those who want a quick game, you can work your way to completion step by step, but for those looking for a deeper game, you'll likely need to spend more time racking up your level scores and practicing speedruns. Despite this being my personal favourite of the 4 Bomberman games on Nintendo 64, it's not the first one I'd recommend to somebody who wants to know which one they should pick up first. This is not helped by the fact that all 4 games are quite different in terms of what they offer, very much like the Bomberman games which are still being released even to this day. I'd personally say that the second attack should fill most gamers' boots by offering a solid single player experience with a well fleshed out multiplayer mode. I think Bomberman Hero instead is for those who want to focus solely on a single player experience, and perhaps someone that's already mastered the vast amount of N64 platform games in the past. Entering such a crowded genre on the console, it was hard for Bomberman Hero to stand out from the crowd. I think this is reflected in the reviews of the time, which as previously mentioned were very mixed. However, revisiting the game in this day, you can definitely find something here that not many other N64 platform games offer, and so I expect this is a title that many people will have overlooked. Combining a solid enough 3D platform experience with an average set of visuals and a sublime soundtrack, Bomberman Hero was perhaps not the hero the series needed, but give it a chance, because there's much more here than the soundtrack which many people tend to focus on. And so with this being the 4th and final Bomberman N64 game I'll be reviewing, it's over to you. I'd love to know which of the 4 Bomberman games on Nintendo 64 do you feel is the best and why. It would also be cool to know which game you preferred from both a single player and a multiplayer perspective. So as always, let me know your thoughts, feelings and opinions in the comment section down below, and until next time.